In the scorching heart of the Arizona desert, a lonely cowboy named Jake Sullivan encounters something that will change his life forever. A dying alien woman with silver skin and eyes like distant galaxies. What begins as an act of mercy transforms into an impossible romance, a hasty wedding, and a honeymoon that reveals secrets darker than the desert night. But when military helicopters descend on his remote ranch, Jake realizes that saving her was only the beginning. This is a story of love, betrayal, and the terrifying price of keeping secrets that were never meant for human hearts. The sun hung mercilessly over the Sonoran desert, turning the sand into a shimmering ocean of heat. Jake Sullivan wiped the sweat from his weathered face as he rode his horse across the endless expanse of his family's ranch, 3,000 acres of nothing but sagebrush, rattlesnakes, and memories. At 42, Jake had long accepted his solitude. His wife had left him 15 years ago, tired of the isolation, tired of a man who loved the desert more than civilization. Now, his only companions were his cattle, his dog Rex, and the howling wind that sang through the canyons at night. It was just past noon when Rex started barking frantically, running ahead toward a cluster of rocks near the dried riverbed. Jake followed, expecting to find a coyote or maybe an injured calf. What he found instead defied every law of nature he'd ever known. She lay crumpled among the stones, her body radiating a faint blue luminescence that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Her skin wasn't like human skin. It shimmered with an iridescent quality, shifting between silver and pale violet depending on how the light hit it. She was humanoid in shape, unmistakably feminine, with long limbs and delicate features. But her eyes, when they fluttered open for just a moment, were enormous and completely black, like twin voids holding entire universes. Jake's first instinct was to run. His second was to call someone, anyone. But as he stared at her broken form, seeing the strange burns across her torso, and the way her breathing came in shallow, desperate gasps, something deeper than fear took hold. Compassion. The same instinct that made him pull calves from difficult births and nurse injured animals back to health. He couldn't leave her to die alone in the desert. Jake carried her back to his ranch house, her body surprisingly light, almost hollow-boned like a bird's. He laid her on his bed, unsure what to do next. How do you treat an alien? Do they need water? Oxygen? He settled for keeping her cool and comfortable, placing damp claws on her forehead, whispering reassurances he wasn't sure she could understand. For 3 days, she hovered between life and death. Jake never left her side, feeding her water drop by drop, watching as the blue glow gradually strengthened. On the third night, she finally opened her eyes fully and looked at him. There was intelligence there, profound and ancient, and something else gratitude. "You saved me," she said, her voice like wind chimes, speaking perfect English with an accent he couldn't place. "I am Lyra. My ship ... it malfunctioned. Crashed in your desert." Jake should have been terrified. He should have called the authorities. Instead, he found himself captivated. As Lyra recovered over the following weeks, they talked for hours. She told him about her world, a planet orbiting a binary star system thousands of light years away, where her people had mastered space travel, but had lost something essential in the process. Genuine connection, real emotion. She had been a scout, exploring distant worlds, when her vessel failed. Lyra was unlike anyone Jake had ever known. She was curious about everything, the way sunlight filtered through dust, the taste of coffee, the sound of coyotes at night. She laughed at his jokes, listened to his stories about the ranch, and when she looked at him, he felt seen in a way he hadn't in decades. Against all logic, against all reason, Jake fell in love with her. And somehow, impossibly, she seemed to love him back. 6 weeks after finding Lyra in the desert, Jake did something that everyone who knew him would have called insane. He married her. The wedding was small, held at sunset on a mesa overlooking the ranch, with only the local pastor, a progressive old hippie named Father Miguel, who asked no questions, and two witnesses Jake barely knew from town. Lyra wore a simple white dress Jake had bought from a boutique in Phoenix, and she'd learned to mute the natural luminescence of her skin, making her appear almost human under the golden hour light. Almost. Jake knew it was reckless. He knew they were from different worlds, literally. But for the first time since his first wife left, he felt alive. Lyra brought color to his gray existence, wonder to his routine. When she touched his hand, he felt electricity. When she smiled, the stars seemed brighter. The paperwork had been surprisingly easy to forge. Lyra had some kind of technology, a small device she kept hidden, that could generate perfect identification documents. "My people have been visiting Earth longer than you know," she told him with a mysterious smile. "We've learned to blend in, but there were signs, even then, that something wasn't quite right." Strange things began happening around the ranch. Electronics would malfunction when Lyra walked past. His radio picked up bizarre signals at night, sounds that almost formed words in languages that hurt to hear. And sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, Jake would catch her staring at the sky with an expression of deep longing or perhaps regret. His neighbors had started asking questions too. Old Bill Peterson from the adjacent ranch had spotted Lyra from a distance and commented on Jake's foreign girlfriend. The mailman had seen her once and seemed visibly disturbed, though he couldn't explain why. And twice, Jake had noticed dark SUVs with tinted windows driving slowly past his property, vehicles that didn't belong to anyone local. Lyra assured him everything was fine. "They're just curious," she said. Humans always are. But her reassurances felt hollow, especially when she added, "We should take a honeymoon. Get away from here for a while." Jake agreed, partly because he wanted to give Lyra a proper celebration, partly because he was starting to feel paranoid. The desert, once his sanctuary, now felt exposed. He kept imagining satellites watching from above, telescopes pointed at his little ranch from some government facility. They planned a trip to a cabin Jake's grandfather had built deep in the Mogollon Rim country, 3 hours north of place, so remote that cell phones didn't work, and the nearest neighbor was 15 miles away. It seemed perfect, romantic even. A chance for them to truly be alone, to explore their new life together without the weight of the world watching. The night before they left, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay beside Lyra, watching her breathe, studying her features in the moonlight streaming through the window. She was beautiful, no question, but there was something alien about her beauty that he couldn't quite process. Her proportions were slightly off, eyes a bit too large, fingers a bit too long, neck too elegant to be entirely human. "What are you thinking?" Lyra asked suddenly, her eyes opening to reveal those deep black pools. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," Jake lied. The truth was more complicated. He was thinking that love shouldn't require this much secrecy, that marriage shouldn't feel like hiding from the world. Lyra smiled sadly, as if she could read his thoughts. "Tomorrow will be perfect," she whispered. "I promise. After tomorrow, everything will be clear." It was the way she said it, with a finality that suggested something more than romance, that made Jake's blood run cold. But before he could ask what she meant, she kissed him, and he let his questions dissolve into the warmth of her touch. They packed the truck at dawn, loading supplies for a week in the wilderness. As they drove away from the ranch, Jake glanced in his rearview mirror and saw Rex standing at the gate, whining anxiously. For a moment, Jake considered turning back. But Lyra placed her hand on his thigh, and he kept driving north into the mountains, toward whatever truth awaited them in that remote cabin. The cabin sat nestled in a grove of ponderosa pines, exactly as Jake remembered from childhood visits with his grandfather. No electricity, no running water except from a hand pump well. Just kerosene lamps and a wood stove and the infinite silence of the forest. It should have been romantic. Instead, Jake felt a growing unease he couldn't name. Lyra seemed different here, away from the ranch. More agitated, She kept checking the sky through the gaps in the trees, her body tense like a deer sensing a predator. On their first night, she barely touched the dinner Jake cooked on the wood stove, instead standing at the window for hours, staring into the darkness. "Lyra, what's wrong?" Jake finally asked. "You've been acting strange since we got here." She turned to him, and in the lamplight, her eyes seemed to glow faintly, that alien quality impossible to hide. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "Something I should have told you before we married." Jake's heart hammered. "Okay, tell me." Lyra sat down across from him, her hands folded on the rough wooden table. "When you found me in the desert, I wasn't just a scout whose ship malfunctioned. I was running, escaping. My people. They're not explorers, Jake. We're harvesters." "Harvesters?" The word felt wrong in his mouth. "We find worlds with compatible biology, and we adapt them, extract resources. My species has been doing this for thousands of years. Earth has been on our list for centuries, but there were protocols, agreements to wait until humanity reached a certain technological threshold. I was part of the advance team, preparing for first contact." She paused, her voice dropping. "But I made a mistake. I started questioning our mission. Started seeing humans not as resources, but as people. Beings worthy of respect." Jake pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly. "What are you saying? That your people are planning to invade Earth?" "Not invade. Assimilate. Merge. It's what we do. We bond with species, share technology, integrate cultures. But it's never equal. We always remain dominant. And those who resist double quotes." She trailed off, the implication clear. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Lyra's composure cracked, tears forming in those impossible eyes. "Because I was selfish. Because for the first time in my entire existence, I felt something real. You showed me kindness when you should have been afraid. You treated me as precious when you should have seen me as a threat. I fell in love with you, Jake, and I thought maybe I could hide from my past. Live a quiet life on your ranch. Pretend I was just another person looking for peace. But you can't," Jake said, understanding dawning. "They're looking for you. That's why we're hiding. Yes, my ship's destruction sent a signal. My people know approximately where I crashed. They'll send retrieval teams, and when they come, they'll find not just me, but evidence of our contact. And you ... Her voice broke. "You'll be classified as compromised. A security risk. And you?" The cabin suddenly felt suffocating. Jake walked to the door, needing air, needing to think. Outside, the stars blazed with an intensity he'd never noticed before, and now they felt malevolent, each point of light possibly concealing watching eyes. "There's more," Lyra said from behind him. "The reason I suggested this honeymoon, this remote location, I was going to ask you to help me hide permanently. There are places on Earth, underground networks of dissidents from various worlds, people like me who've chosen your planet over their missions. I have coordinates, contacts. But it would mean leaving everything, Jake. Your ranch, your life, your identity. We'd have to disappear completely." Jake turned to face her. "And if I say no?" "Then I leave alone. Tonight. And you go back to your ranch and tell anyone who asks that you found a strange woman, helped her, and she left. You played dumb. Maybe they believe you, maybe they don't. But at least you'd have a chance at your normal life. And you?" "I'd spend the rest of my existence running, hiding, always alone." She moved closer. "But I won't force you into this, Jake. You didn't sign up for interstellar politics and ancient alien conspiracies. You signed up for love, and I've given you nothing but danger." Jake looked at this woman, this being he'd married weeks ago. Everything had been a lie, or if not a lie, then a catastrophic omission of truth. But as he searched her face, he saw genuine anguish there, genuine love. She was alien, yes, but her pain was achingly human. Before he could answer, a sound cut through the night, the distant thrum of helicopter rotors growing steadily louder. Lyra's face went pale, her skin's luminescence flickering. "They're here," she whispered. "Jake, we need to leave. Now." They ran. Jake grabbed his truck keys and the emergency pack. He always kept ready, old habits from years of unpredictable desert living. Lyra moved with inhuman speed, gathering her few possessions in seconds. But even as they rushed to the vehicle, they both knew it was too late. The helicopter sounds had multiplied, coming from multiple directions, boxing them in. Through the trees, Jake saw lights, not just helicopter searchlights, but ground vehicles approaching on the Forest Service roads. At least 4 of them, moving in coordinated patterns. Whatever was coming for them wasn't local law enforcement. This was military, federal, or something worse. "The truck won't work," Lyra said urgently. "They'll have the roads blocked. We need to go on foot, deeper into the forest." "I'm not a young man," Jake protested. "I can't outrun. You won't have to run alone." Lyra's form began to shimmer, that blue luminescence returning. "I've been suppressing my natural abilities, trying to seem human. But desperate times, ... She touched Jake's arm, and suddenly he felt energy coursing through him, his exhaustion evaporating, his muscles filling with strength he hadn't possessed since his 20s. They plunged into the dark forest, Lyra leading with preternatural sureness, navigating by starlight and some internal sense Jake couldn't fathom. Behind them, voices shouted orders, dogs barked, and the mechanical whine of drones joined the helicopter chorus. The entire mountain was lighting up with military activity. How did they find us so fast? Jake gasped as they scrambled down a rocky ravine. "The marriage license," Lyra said bitterly. "I should have realized. They monitor official records for anomalies. A middle-aged rancher suddenly marrying someone with no prior history, no digital footprint before 6 weeks ago. It would have flagged their systems immediately." They reached a small creek, and Lyra led them upstream, the cold water numbing Jake's feet through his boots. Classic evasion technique to confuse the dogs, but Jake doubted it would work against whatever technology was pursuing them. "Why are they so desperate to find you?" he asked. "If your people are planning to make contact anyway, what difference does one rogue agent make?" Lyra's expression in the moonlight was grim. "Because I know things, Jake. Dates, coordinates, weak points in Earth's defenses. I help plan the integration strategy. If I've truly defected, if I decide to warn humanity instead of hiding quietly, I become the single greatest threat to our invasion timeline. They need to silence me. So warn them. Tell the government everything. Help Earth prepare. It's not that simple. First, they'd never fully believe me. I'd be locked in a laboratory, studied, dissected eventually. Second, knowing what's coming won't help. My people have been planning this for centuries. Earth's technology is thousands of years behind ours. Warning you would only create panic and despair. They emerged from the creek into a meadow bathed in starlight. For a moment, everything was peaceful, beautiful, even the kind of pristine wilderness Jake had always treasured. Then the helicopters crested the ridge behind them, spotlights sweeping the landscape like judgmental eyes. "There!" An amplified voice boomed from above. "Do not attempt to run. You are surrounded. Mrs. Sullivan, we know what you are. Mr. Sullivan, you are not considered hostile. Cooperate, and you will not be harmed." Lyra grabbed Jake's hand. "Last chance," she said urgently. "You can surrender, claim ignorance. They might believe you, might let you return to your life." Jake looked at her, really looked at her. This impossible being who crashed into his life and turned everything upside down. She'd lied to him, endangered him, dragged him into a nightmare beyond comprehension. By all rights, he should turn her over, should choose his own survival. But he'd spent 15 years alone in that desert, dead inside except for a pulse. Lyra had awakened something in him, reminded him what it meant to feel alive. And whatever else she was, whatever complications came with loving her, she was his wife. He'd made a promise. "I don't abandon family," Jake said firmly. "Where do we go?" Relief and love flashed across Lyra's face. She pointed to a dark opening in the cliff face across the meadow, a cave, barely visible. "There. It's not just a cave. There's a hidden facility built by other refugees. If we can reach it, we'll have options." They sprinted across the open ground, the helicopters descending, the spotlights pinning them like insects. Jake's enhanced muscles carried him faster than should have been possible, but it still wasn't fast enough. Soldiers emerged from the tree line ahead, blocking their path, weapons raised. "Final warning," the amplified voice commanded. "Stop or we will open fire." Lyra raised her hands, and Jake felt the air itself change, becoming charged with electricity. Blue light rippled from her body in waves, and suddenly the soldiers were stumbling, their weapons sparking and dying, the helicopter's engines coughing and sputtering. She was emitting some kind of electromagnetic pulse, Jake realized, disabling their technology. But the effort was costing her. Jake could see her shaking, her luminescence flickering like a dying bulb. She was burning through her life force, and they still had 50 yards to the cave. "Go!" she gasped. "I'll hold them. Together," Jake insisted, half carrying her now as they staggered toward the cave entrance. Behind them, the soldiers were recovering, switching to backup weapons, preparing to pursue. They stumbled into the cave just as gunfire erupted, bullets sparking off the rock walls. But the cave was deeper than it appeared, twisting downward into the earth. And as they descended into the darkness, Jake saw something that made his breath catch artificial lights in the distance, and the cave walls transitioning from natural stone to smooth metal. Lyra hadn't been lying. There was something down here, something that might save them or damn them both forever. The facility was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. The cave opened into a vast underground chamber, its walls covered with bioluminescent panels that pulsed with gentle light. Technology from a dozen worlds lined the corridors of organic computers that seemed to breathe, holographic displays showing star maps and alien script and beings. Dozens of beings that weren't human, moving through the space with purpose. Lyra collapsed as soon as they entered, her energy completely spent from the electromagnetic pulse. Two figures rushed forward, one vaguely humanoid but with crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbows, another that looked like a bipedal mantis with 4 arms. They caught Lyra gently, communicating in a language of clicks and harmonics. She burned too much energy, the crystalline being said in perfect English, its voice melodic. But she recovered. "You must be Jake. She told us about you in her transmissions." "Transmissions?" Jake was reeling from everything: the facility, the aliens, the casual revelation that Lyra had been in contact with others. "Come," the being said, introducing itself as Kale. "We have much to discuss, and your military is probably already trying to locate this facility. We have shielding, but it won't hold forever against concentrated effort." Jake was led to a chamber that looked like it had been designed for humans, or at least for humanoid comfort. Chairs, tables, even something resembling a coffee maker. Around the central table sat 4 others. Kale, the crystalline being, a human-looking woman who introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chun, the mantis being called Thrix, and a small, child-sized entity that glowed with internal fire, name unpronounceable. "Welcome to the sanctuary," Dr. Chen said tiredly. She looked to be in her 50s, with the bearing of someone who'd seen too much. "I'm the only human permanent resident here, though we get visitors. I used to be a xenobiologist at NASA until I learned what we were really studying. Couldn't participate in the cover-up, so I ran. That was 12 years ago." "Cover-up?" Jake's voice was hoarse. "Multiple alien species have been visiting Earth for decades, some for centuries," she explained. "Your government knows. Most governments know. They've been negotiating, making deals, trading technology for various concessions. But they've kept it secret because they're not negotiating from a position of strength. They're stalling, hoping to develop defenses before the real contact begins. Lyra's people, the Xian Collective, they're one of the major powers. And their integration is scheduled to begin within 5 years. Jake felt the floor tilt beneath him. Integration. That's what Lyra called it. What does it actually mean? Kale answered, its voice sad. The Xian have perfected a form of cultural and biological assimilation. They arrive as friends, offering technology, medicine, solutions to all a species' problems. In exchange, they ask for small compromises, shared governance, genetic sampling, cultural exchange. Within a generation, the original species has been absorbed into the collective. Not destroyed, but transformed, neutered of independence. The Xian grows stronger with each world they integrate, adding new biology, new perspectives. They see it as enlightened empire building. Those of us who've escaped see it as sophisticated extinction. And Earth agreed to this? Earth's governments didn't have much choice, Dr. Chun said bitterly. The alternative was immediate conquest. The Xian offered a timeline, a chance for humanity to prepare, to evolve to a point where integration might be more equitable. But it's a lie. No species has ever integrated with the Xian as equals. We're cattle being fattened for slaughter, just smart enough to understand our fate. Thrix, the mantis being, clicked softly before speaking. But there is another way. We few who've escaped our own integrations, we've been building something here, beneath Earth's surface. A resistance network. Not to fight, we cannot win militarily, but to preserve. To hide the best of humanity and other species away. To create sanctuaries where genuine diversity can survive the coming integration. When Lyra contacted us, we hoped she might help. She knows the Zhen's plans intimately. Jake's head was spinning. This is insane. Why hasn't anyone spoken publicly? Why not warn the world? Because chaos would serve the Zhen's interests, Dr. Chun said. Panic, global instability, war, it would justify immediate intervention. The current plan depends on humanity remaining calm, functioning, advancing technologically. The moment we prove we're too unstable to manage ourselves, the Xian will move up their timeline. Silence is both a curse and a temporary shield. A soft chime echoed through the facility, and holographic displays flickered to life showing the surface. Jake could see military vehicles surrounding the mountain, drilling equipment being set up, soldiers preparing for a subterranean assault. They're coming, Kale stated. Faster than anticipated? The Xian must have assets embedded in your military, pushing for aggressive action. They want Lyra back very badly. Can this facility defend itself? Jake asked. For a time. But we're not warriors. We're refugees, scholars, preservationists. We have some technology that can delay them, but ultimately, they'll break through. Kale turned its rainbow-refracted eyes to Jake. Which brings us to why you're really here. Lyra didn't just bring you to save herself. She brought you because you represent something we desperately need. What could I possibly offer? I'm just a rancher. The small fire being spoke for the first time, its voice like crackling embers. Authenticity. Humanity untainted by the knowledge of what's coming. You loved Lyra not knowing what she was, what she represented. That kind of genuine connection between species is the antidote to integration. The Zhen's power comes from their ability to make assimilation seem inevitable, desirable, even. But if we can show that true partnership is possible, that love and respect can exist without dominance and submission, we create an alternative narrative. Dr. Chun leaned forward. Jake, we need you to testify. Not to governments, they won't listen, but to people. We're building a distributed network, preparing to release information that can't be suppressed. When the time is right, when humanity is ready, your story, a simple man who loved an alien woman and chose to protect her, Against impossible odds, it could inspire others to resist psychologically, to maintain their humanity, even as integration begins. Jake thought about his quiet life on the ranch, about the simple desires that had driven him: peace, solitude, maybe a little companionship. Now he was being asked to become a symbol, a poster child for human-alien unity. It was absurd. He was nobody, nothing special. But then he thought about Lyra, recovering somewhere in this facility, and how she'd looked at him with those impossible eyes. She'd crossed galaxies, defied her own people, risked everything for a chance at something real. Maybe that was enough. Maybe love, even impossible love, was worth fighting for. "When do we start?" Jake asked. 3 days later, Jake stood in a small chamber watching Lyra sleep in a healing pod, her body surrounded by regenerative light. She'd wake soon, Dr. Chun had assured him, fully recovered from her energy expenditure. But what then? What life could they possibly have together? The military hadn't breached the facility yet, but they were close. The drilling had intensified, and seismic sensors showed teams approaching from multiple vectors. The sanctuary's residents were preparing evacuation protocols, ready to scatter through underground tunnels that connected to other safe houses across the continent. Kale approached, its crystalline form reflecting the healing pod's glow. "You've been standing here for hours. She'll be fine." "Will she?" Jake asked. "Will any of us?" "That depends on choices not yet made." Kale gestured to a viewport showing the star-filled sky above. "The Zun fleet won't arrive for years. Until then, Lyra is one of only 3 of her kind on Earth. The others are embedded in your governments, preparing the way. If we can keep her hidden, keep her testimony preserved, she becomes invaluable when the truth finally emerges. And if we can't, then she returns to the collective, likely mind-wiped and reprogrammed. And you double Kale paused. You become a loose end. The military will classify you, isolate you, perhaps study you to understand how Lyra's biology affected yours. The life you knew is over regardless, Jake. The question is what life you choose next. The healing pod hissed open, and Lyra's eyes fluttered. She saw Jake and smiled weakly. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed. What kind of husband leaves his wife?" She laughed, the sound painful but genuine. "A sensible one. A sane one. One who values self-preservation over romantic gestures." Jake helped her sit up, her skin still faintly luminescent. "I've never been accused of being sensible." Dr. Chun entered the chamber, her expression grim. "We have a situation. The military is offering negotiation. They're willing to let the facility's residents evacuate peacefully if we surrender Lyra and Jake." "Absolutely not," Jake said immediately. "Let me finish," Dr. Chen continued. "They're also offering something else. A deal. If Lyra agrees to limited debriefing, sharing only defensive information, nothing that would reveal the full scope of the Xian's plans, they'll grant both of you protected status. New identities, relocation, a chance to live quietly under observation, but not imprisonment." Lyra shook her head. "It's a trap. The moment I'm in their custody, the embedded Zun agents will ensure I'm transferred to their control. I know how this works." "Perhaps," Kale interjected, "but consider the alternative. We scatter. You spend your life running. Jake loses everything he's ever known. This way, you might find some semblance of peace. Peace as a prisoner," Lyra countered. "Peace as a survivor," Kale corrected. "Not everyone needs to be a martyr. Sometimes living to fight another day is the greatest rebellion." Jake looked between them, understanding the weight of the choice. If they ran, they'd be forever fugitives, always looking over their shoulders. If they negotiated, they might carve out some small existence, but compromised, limited, controlled. "What do you want?" Jake asked Lyra quietly. She took his hand, her skin warm and electric against his. "I want what I've always wanted since I met you. A quiet life. A home. Morning coffee and evening stars. I'm tired, Jake. Tired of running. Tired of fighting. Maybe I'm a coward, but I'd rather have a small life with you than a heroic death without you. You're not a coward, Jake said firmly. You're the bravest person I've ever met. He turned to Dr. Chen. What are the exact terms? Over the next hour, they negotiated through intermediaries. The military or whoever was really in charge agreed to limited debriefing sessions, no physical examinations beyond basic health monitoring, and relocation to a secure but comfortable facility in Montana. Jake and Lyra would be together, but monitored. In exchange, Lyra would share defensive technology that might help humanity prepare for eventual contact, but nothing about the Zhen's strategic plans or timeline. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good, but it was survival. As they prepared to leave the sanctuary, Thrix approached with a small device. This is a dead man's switch, the menace being explained. If anything happens to you, if the agreement is violated, it will automatically release Lyras as full testimony to every media outlet on Earth. Insurance. They'll know we have this, Jake said. That's the point. Mutually assured revelation. They need secrecy as much as you need protection. The journey to the surface was surreal. Soldiers escorted them with a mixture of fear and curiosity, weapons ready but not aimed. They were loaded into an armored vehicle without windows, driven for hours to an unknown destination. Throughout it all, Lyra held Jake's hand, her grip the only real thing in a world gone mad. Their new home was a ranch smaller than Jake's old place, but similar enough to feel familiar. Mountains in the distance, big sky overhead, isolation and space. There were cameras, certainly, and their communications were monitored. But there was also freedom of a sort. Freedom to wake together, to cook meals, to sit on the porch and watch the sunset. On their first evening in the new place, as the sky blazed orange and purple, Jake asked a question that had been haunting him. Do you regret it? Coming to Earth? Meeting me? Lyra considered, her alien features beautiful in the dying light. I regret the pain I've caused you. I regret the life you've lost. But I don't regret loving you. In my species, we're taught that emotions are weaknesses, that connections are chains. But you showed me that connections are what make life worth living. Even if we only have a few years before the integration begins, even if everything eventually falls apart, I'll have had this. I'll have had you. And that's enough. Jake pulled her close, feeling the warmth of her against him, so alien and yet so familiar. Above them, the stars emerged one by one, and Jake wondered which point of light was her home, and whether her people looked at this same sky and felt anything at all. When they come, he said quietly, when the Zhen arrive and everything changes, we'll face it together. We'll show them that love doesn't require assimilation. The two beings from different worlds can choose each other without one dominating the other. A revolution of two, Lyra murmured. It's a start, Jake replied. And in that moment, on that porch, under those infinite stars, it was enough. The future would bring what it would bring: invasion, integration, or some unforeseen alternative. But for now, in this small corner of a vast universe, a lonely cowboy and his alien bride had found something neither of their worlds had been able to give them. A home, not defined by species or planet, but by the simple, radical act of choosing each other. As night fell completely, Jake thought about the recording device Thrix had given them, containing Lyra's full testimony about the coming integration. One day, that information would be released, and the world would know the truth. But until then, they would live quietly, love deeply, and prove that even in the face of inevitable change, authentic connection was possible. The stars watched. The cameras recorded. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Zhan fleet continued its slow approach to Earth, unaware that their carefully laid plans had been complicated by the most unpredictable variable in the universe. Love that refused to be reasonable, refused to be strategic, refused to be anything other than stubbornly, beautifully human.